The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NFL Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in the NFL from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NFL Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in the NFL.
Michael Penix has been named the Falcons starting quarterback.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast.
You know, we talked about how Raheem gave a tepid endorsement of Kirk Cousins on Monday night after the Raiders win. Falcons stopped their 4-game losing streak. Then Raheem did a presser on Tuesday and wasn't ready to name Kirk the official starter this week. And he was like, we'll figure it out. And, and I had a Locked On Falcons insider hit me up after seeing that and basically saying or they said it after the Monday night game, not necessarily after the Tuesday game, but basically was like, that's very similar to what Arthur Smith sounded like the week before he benched Desmond Ridder the first time back in 2023 before a Vikings game. And I was like, Raheem didn't sound that way on Monday night, but I think by the time we got to Tuesday, it was, with his presser coming off the heels of that, it did seem a little bit more like that. And so Michael Penix is the Falcons starter now and presumably will be forever, right? Because, he's going to be so glorious moving forward. But for those of you that have not been listening to Locked On Falcons these last several weeks where this has been a frequent topic of discussion, you're probably sitting here, Aaron, catch me up on how did we get here, right? And we got here because Kirk Cousins has not played well over the last 5 weeks. So Kirk Cousins got off to a good start, or, it was not a great September, but it was good enough. And then we got to Kirktober, right? And we had a lot of fun with Kirktober with how well Kirk Cousins played, had 2 very good games against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, had a couple of other solid games mixed in there, had a good game against the Dallas Cowboys to begin the month of November. And we're like, oh, we're in Kirksimber. And it's been bad ever since, right? He didn't play poorly in every game since then. Like, I thought he had some good moments in the Saints game. It's just overall the Falcons, he didn't throw a touchdown in that game. He threw an interception in that game. And that started what became the narrative over the next 4 weeks. That became sort of the defining narrative talking about Kirk Cousins, was he had 0 touchdowns, over the next 4 weeks with the Saints, the Broncos, the Chargers coming out of the bye week, and then against the Vikings. And he had 8 interceptions across those games. Including 4 against the Chargers. And that was the worst performance. There was progress, in my opinion, despite the stat line not looking pretty with 0 touchdowns and 2 interceptions in that Vikings game. I thought Kirk had 5 to 7 really good throws in that game and looked a lot more like the Kirk we saw in October in that Vikings game, despite the 2 interceptions that were, egregious errors in that game. And then you saw against the Raiders, not a great performance in the first half, but he broke the non-touchdown streak. Had a nice throw on a 30-yard touchdown to Drake London in the first quarter on the second drive of the Falcons game. And you're like, okay, like, it wasn't a great first half, but we go into halftime. Kirk, seemingly got that monkey off his back, and we can get this thing rolling in the second half. And then on the very first pass of the second half, first down, the one time the Falcons threw the ball on a first down in that Raiders game, Kirk threw a pick, trying to target Charlie Warner over the middle. And thereafter, the Falcons' second half play calling basically became some of the most conservative, softest, scaredest play calling I've ever seen in an NFL game, where they ran run. And the only time they really passed the ball was on third down. I think I charted it, talked about it. If you look at their first and second down play calling in the second half after that Kirk Cousins interception, they threw the ball 3 times, including an interception, including, I think, a sack as well. And then I think one other play where they botched a play action fake or whatever. And they ran the ball like 20 plus times. So they basically had a 90-10 run pass ratio on early downs after that. And they basically played scared the rest of the game, trying not to lose. And I was very vocally critical of that mentality that the Falcons had on Monday. And if any of you guys watched that game, you saw, a very terrible game, because you saw 2 teams desperate to not lose the game and neither one trying to win that game. And that did not make for a very entertaining football game. And so basically the conversation at that point is like, if the play caller, Zach Robinson, Falcons offensive coordinator, we've been very critical of here on Locked On Falcons, probably a lot more critical on Locked On Falcons than anybody else is. And the episode that you may or may not have heard yet, breaks down some of the reasons why we've been so critical of Zach Robinson in addition to Kirk Cousins. But basically the idea is if the play calling is that conservative, that soft, that scared, you might as well play the rookie, because basically the Falcons, since that Week 10 game, have been one of the most conservative offenses in the NFL in terms of their neutral pass frequency. If you look at websites like Running Backs Don't Matter, and they sort of chart these things as part of their old let Russ cook agenda, from many years ago, and they chart this league wide and whatnot, and they chart things like that. And the Falcons, basically since that Saints game, I think the Rams might have been more conservative in neutral situations like that, and a lot of those being early downs. But the Falcons were number 2. And so you saw this Falcon team scale back their offense in a major way these last couple of weeks as their solve for Kirk Cousins. And it's basically no different than how you would play with a rookie quarterback that you didn't necessarily trust yet because of their inexperience. And it basically became the conversation of, if you're going to lose, or, in the case on Monday night, win tentatively with Kirk Cousins, might as well do it with Michael Penix. You didn't bring in Kirk Cousins. You didn't pay him all the money. And we'll talk about the financial ramifications of this later in the episode. But you didn't pay him all this money to basically play like you had a rookie quarterback, to play like you had a third string quarterback coming off the practice squad with only 2 days of practice that doesn't know the offense, and you just basically run the most basic version of your offense. That's not why Kirk Cousins was brought in here. And so with the Falcons basically being in that predicament, they made the move at this moment to start the clock on Michael Penix, right? And we'll talk about sort of what the Falcons' initial plans were with Michael Penix when they drafted him 8th overall, controversial draft selection. But, took him top 10. It's unprecedented, unorthodox move for the Falcons. I did a podcast the day before the draft saying there's no way the Falcons are going to do this because no team has ever done this, right? The Jordan Love comparison was always made where, the Packers did this twice with Aaron Rodgers drafting him in the first round when they had Brett Favre. The Packers doing it again with Jordan Love when they had Aaron Rodgers. But, the big difference was that was a late first round pick, right? It's very different taking a flyer on a quarterback at 25 or wherever they pick those guys versus taking them at 8. And no team had ever done that. And I, said it with my chest the day before the draft. Oh, the Falcons aren't going to do this, right? They'll take a quarterback, but it's not going to be in the top 10, despite all these recent rumors from, folks at ESPN that the Falcons really love Michael Penix. And then, I had the egg on my face. But when the Falcons did that, their tentative plan was we've guaranteed 2 years of Kirk Cousins, and we'll sit Michael Penix for 2 years, and then we'll toss him the QUs potentially in year 3, assuming all these things go the right way. And it was always a very big question whether or not the Falcons could walk that tightrope of Kirk's just got to be just good enough to believe in him to be the starter, but not quite good enough where you're going to feel compelled to be married to him more than 2 years. And then on top of that, you have to successfully develop Michael Penix in the background. And as we saw with a player like Jordan Love, who sat for 3-4 years in Green Bay, and then those first half of his rookie season, or what was essentially his rookie season, like year 4 for him, he struggled, and then he kind of figured it out in the back half and went on a run in the postseason, and everybody was ready to declare, "Hey, man, this is a great move." We talked about it in draft. I'm not going to rehash it, but we talked about the opportunity cost that the Packers had, where they could have used that pick in order to make their team better, the rest of their team better. And that was a big part of the conversation as we watched all season long with Michael Penix riding the bench and watching the Falcons have the NFL's worst pass rush, right? And everybody thought the Falcons were going to take a pass rush. I remember doing a podcast in April saying they kind of have to take a pass rush because they've ignored this all offseason. Now, the last couple of weeks, the pass rush has come alive. They've been the best pass rush in the NFL inexplicably. So now that they made the switch to Michael Penix, I guess, they'll go back to being what they were or whatever, but maybe they can sustain it. But yeah, the Falcons made that unorthodox moves, and a lot of people question, basically the Falcons were saying we're the smartest guys in the room. We know what we're doing, and this is going to work, and it didn't work. Basically, that's why we're here. So Michael Penix is the new starting quarterback. We'll see if he can sort of keep their playoff hopes alive. The Falcons need to essentially run the table over these next 3 weeks in order to make the playoffs.
Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more near you. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
Come Christmas, what do the Chiefs do about Mahomes?
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
A little bit maybe shifting of gears today as he was on the podium, gonna try it out. I love the concept. Let's try it out on a high ankle sprain. Makes me nervous. But how did you read the decision that they're going to let him practice? They're going to let him see how he feels. And Andy Reid has pretty much just said, we're going to let the kid decide.
Yeah, I appreciate the fact that I think you and I, Ryan, are on the same page. That when we hear, I'm not going to say the word I'm thinking here, but I'm just going to let it stand and just say when you hear minor high ankle sprain, I kind of think minor head injury and minor gunshot wound. I mean, there's not really such a thing. So I don't know. It's hard because we know that one way or the other, the Chiefs were going to go full propaganda mode this week anyway. I mean, they want to make sure the Houston Texans and even the Pittsburgh Steelers on the other side of it, that they think that Patrick Mahomes is going to play. So they want these teams, especially the Texans, to be preparing for two quarterbacks because there's no doubt. I mean, if Carson Wentz plays, it's a different game plan. It's a different strategy. So, you're going to, if you're the Texans, you're going to have to prepare for both quarterbacks. And if Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes just came out and said, he's going to play, or he's not going to play this week, you take away all the mystery. So I can't divorce from the fact that Chiefs we're going to do that anyway. So it's kind of regardless of how Mahomes looks and feels. But you really get into it and then you start thinking of, okay. And Andy Reid addressed the question today, which was, are you going to take into consideration Saturday, Wednesday? Because we know that coming back after playing on a Saturday and then having to play that quick on a Wednesday on an ankle sprain isn't easy. So, in one way you could certainly look at it and say, look, if you want Patrick Mahomes to play on Christmas Day, you probably don't want him to play on Saturday. So, but Andy Reid's not having any of that, I mean, from the way it's being presented and the way that the Chiefs are talking about it, I mean, I'm expecting Carson Wentz to play, especially the fact that they put him on the podium on Tuesday. If they thought that Patrick Mahomes was 100% to start or even 80% to start, I don't think we would have talked to Carson Wentz today. So that I think is a pretty big, indicator right now of at least what their thinking is.
I think it's a decision point, and you got to let him be there or whatever, but you got to protect him from himself. And I do think that there's something to say that, okay, if you had to play, if you really had to, you could. Okay, fine, you're going to be the backup. I don't know that you need to go to the third quarterback, so we'll just call you the backup. You help him out. Make his adjustment. Let Carson shine a little bit. What was your impression then of Carson and his first real appearance in terms of actually getting to the point where he may have to prepare to be on the field?
Yeah, I mean, in the limited action, I thought it was fine. He had a couple of really good throws, picked up a first down after, getting first and 15 after the false start penalty. And that was really the only blemish when Carson was out there. They got a couple of those calls, and that's just what can happen when you get, a new quarterback that comes in. You're not used to the cadence, especially when you've got some guys that go off the cadence. I mean, Juwan Taylor has not heard of Carson Wentz as much, and he is a cadence guy. So if he plays with Carson Wentz, I think you're going to get a couple of false starts from him. We saw a false start from Trey Smith. I mean, I think Xavier Worthy, did he have the other one? You can get those when the backup quarterback, just not everybody's used to the rhythm. If the more snaps they get with Carson Wentz this week, the better off they'll be. And I'm expecting that they're going to get a decent number of snaps. The only thing that was really confusing to me was just that, the Chiefs did list Patrick Mahomes as a full participant on Tuesday. Mm-hmm. Now, it was a very light, breezy practice, so doesn't necessarily mean anything, but that was at least, and whether, once again, that's just an attempt. not saying you can't, you're not supposed to be able to be, manipulate. Let's put that word. Let's use that word on the injury report. So we got to take it as it is. But it was an interesting development. The truly one interesting development to me on Tuesday.
I agree with you there. There were a couple others. We're going to talk about them in a minute, but just with the impression of Carson today and what you think, I agree with you. I would be cautious and I would play Carson. With what he said today and what you know that you need to accomplish, what does change for you? How do you approach playing Carson over Mahomes against the Texans?
Well, I mean, if you got to go with his strengths. I mean, and that's the one thing. I mean, the Chiefs in the past they've had some times that they've had quarterbacks that obviously don't have Mahomes' skill set, but they didn't feel like they had to change the game plan a whole lot. I mean, I think you do have to change the game plan a little bit more with Carson Wentz because they are really two different styles of quarterbacks. Carson, I think, is a lot more comfortable under center. Play action is a much bigger, tool in his bag than it is for Mahomes, especially from under center. I don't think he's as comfortable in the shotgun as Mahomes is. So those things you do have to tweak. I mean, and Andy Reid's got the playbook to do that. I mean, they've got the, ability to, shade this, the game plan in the direction of Carson Wentz, but it, also means you're going to run the football a lot more. And hey, running the football from under center, is that actually an advantage? Could be. I mean, here's the crazy thing, Ryan. I honestly, I wouldn't be surprised that if Carson Wentz plays, he has a good day, because it's it's going to be kind of something that the other defenses haven't seen. They're not used to, but Carson Wentz is, his goal is, I think, going to be to just play a simple game manager as he can. And if that means handing off the football, it means taking his drop and delivering the ball on time and on schedule. He's not going to do any crazy, dancing around, moving around the pocket, trying to escape, anything of that nature. He's going to either throw the ball or he's going to throw it away. I mean, that's what's going to happen if the pressure comes. So, I mean, to me, that's one thing that the Chiefs have just been missing. I mean, you feel like, and Mahomes even alluded to it on Tuesday when he admitted that he made a mistake, trying to take that deep ball to Justin Watson instead of taking the, short, shallow cross to Xavier Worthy, because that probably would have gone for a huge gain. So that's the thing, is that I think there's a chance that Carson Wentz could play and have a really good game.
Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. And you can look at some early NFL lines. The Vikings are headed to the Pacific Northwest to face the Seahawks. FanDuel likes the Vikes by 3.5 points on the road. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
The Tennessee Titans have benched Will Levis.
You are Locked On Titans, your daily Tennessee Titans podcast.
We got the report from ESPN's Jeremy Fowler on Tuesday afternoon that the Tennessee Titans would, in fact, be benching Will Levis for the rest of the season and going with Mason Rudolph as the starting quarterback. This is not a shocking piece of news at the end of the day. We talked on yesterday's episode why I didn't really have a care as to whether they stayed with Levis or went with Rudolph because of the state of the team. But my expectation was that the Titans would bench Will Levis because at the end of the day, like Brian Callahan said in his press conference on Monday, you owe it to the rest of the team to not put a quarterback out there that is actively hurting the team. And not only that, but Brian Callahan has benched players at other positions for poor play. So you couldn't just not do that to Will Levis. It sends the wrong message to the locker room. But again, my big takeaway from this, and I'll talk about what this means for the future. I think Brian Callahan this means a lot for him going forward. I think when you look at the future of the quarterback position and the Will Levis experience or whatever, it means a lot about, that going into the future. But just right now in the moment, whether you supported Will Levis, which I have done, whether you hated Will Levis the entire time and wanted him to fail and wanted the Tennessee Titans to lose games so you could be right about Will Levis failing, whether you're on this team, this side of the fence, that side of the fence, doesn't really matter in my opinion. It's a sad day for you. And I already know that some of the comments are going to say, not sad for me. I hated Will Levis. I couldn't wait for him to be gone. But, well, your Tennessee Titans suck. They are lost as a franchise. They are years away from being a serious football team. Congratulations. You were right. Is that what you want to hear? That is my point at the end of the day. No matter whether you liked Will Levis, you disliked Will Levis, this is a major loss for you today. Because remember, the question that we had coming into the year, the number one question that the Tennessee Titans had to answer, and the most important thing was, can Will Levis be your franchise quarterback going forward? And now we know that the answer is no. The answer is unequivocally impossible to misunderstand. The answer is no. Will Levis is not the Tennessee Titans quarterback of the future. And again, I don't care whether you liked him, hated him, disliked him, whatever you want to call it. This is a bad, bad day. Because this means what sadly Tennessee Titans fans have dealt with for more years than not. They don't have a franchise quarterback. And there is no worse place that you could possibly be in the NFL than knowing that you don't have a franchise quarterback. And the biggest problem for me is the Titans don't have a good path towards having a franchise quarterback. So there's anger about the way the season has went. There's disappointment that Will Levis hasn't been able to take steps to be that answer for the Titans. But more than anything else, my emotion right now is sadness. Not because Will Levis didn't work, but because once again, it means that the Tennessee Titans, the team that I have loved for 25 years, it means that the Tennessee Titans do not have the answer at quarterback. They don't have any hope of having the answer at quarterback. There is nothing now. And that, more importantly than anything, whether you were right or wrong about Will Levis as a pro, I was a never Levis guy before the draft. But then the Titans drafted him. And what are you going to do at that moment in time? Say, no, I hate this guy. It isn't going to work, blah, 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 be negative. No, you put your support behind the players on your team and hope that they can figure it out. And no matter which way you want to slice it, whether you didn't like it, you liked it, you supported, you didn't, this is a bad day for Titans fans. And don't let these Tennessee Titans fans that hated Will Levis tell you that they're happy now that he failed, because deep down inside, they know that they are unhappy that the Tennessee Titans are once again a lost team with no quarterback. There is no sprucing that up to make that feel good, to feel right about that. That is awful. It sucks. It's the worst place that you could possibly be as an NFL franchise, is to be a team that doesn't have a quarterback and doesn't have a path to get one. More importantly than the future, than Brian Callahan, than what they do at quarterback next year, any of those things, more importantly than any of that, this sucks. It sucks that Will Levis did not work out. It is a bad thing for the Tennessee Titans. It is a bad feeling to have. They are so far away. It didn't work. And where do we go from here? So we're going to talk about the future ramifications. But the reality is this moment right here is not a good one for Titans fans. I don't care who you are or what you think. This is a bad day for the Tennessee Titans, because it's the moment that we all, again, we collectively in the Titans tribe, take off our two-tone glasses and look at each other and know we are as far away as we have ever been right now. And that's because Will Levis isn't the answer. Now, you could say, on a positive note, at least the Titans have an answer. But it's like when you go to the doctor because you don't feel good and they tell you you have a terminal illness. You got your answer, but it was not the answer that you were looking for. But now we do need to look into the future as to what this means going forward. We'll talk about Brian Callahan, talk about what the Titans do at quarterback next season. Before I continue, thanks again for making Locked On Titans your first to listen each and every day. But I look at this from Brian Callahan's perspective. So I think it's easy to say, well, Brian Callahan was hired to get the best out of Will Levis and he failed, therefore he's a failure, and it makes it easier to fire him after 1 year. You didn't accomplish the one thing that you were meant to do. And I think, you could obviously look at it that way, but I think that's a bit unwise. I think that is reading into things too literally. I think that there is a reality where right now the conversations are, even back when Brian Callahan was hired, the conversations were, I think that I can fix Will Levis. I think that I can get the best out of Will Levis. But the other side of it is they had to have had the conversation of, if I can't, or if Will just isn't good enough or whatever, what do we do then? So I think there's a faulty line of thinking in the NFL that any coach can make a bad player good. You could put Kyle Shanahan with Jamarcus Russell, and Jamarcus Russell isn't going to turn into a good NFL quarterback. You know what I mean? Like, there is a line in the sand where the coaching can only be so good before the player's talent has to matter. You could take Vince Lombardi and give him the Titans practice squad, and they're not going to turn into a great NFL team because Vince Lombardi's such a great coach. There is a talent level that has to be there, a skill level that has to be there, a quality level that has to be there for a good coach to make a player even better. Like, that is a reality. And for me, the turnovers early in the year, the things that Will Levis has done wrong this year, I have a hard time blaming Brian Callahan for them. Think about all the bad turnovers at the beginning of the year. You know what I mean? Think about the turnovers, the 4 turnovers that Will Levis had in this game. Like, at some point, that's not on Brian Callahan. Now, I'm not here to tell you that Brian Callahan is absolved of blame for this season because Will Levis was so bad. That is not true either. Brian Callahan has definitely had his own faults and problems this year and deserves a large piece of blame pie. I would probably give Brian Callahan and Will Levis the same amount of blame pie for the season, okay? I am not here to tell you it's not Brian Callahan's fault. But what I am here to tell you is the reality of the situation is he probably goes to ownership and he says, hey, we weren't great this year, but this team was better than what we looked like because we were trying to be patient with Will.